Good afternoon. First of all, I want to introduce you to my assistant. He is doing graphical recording on my keynotes. You all can have a copy of that if you're interested in that. Let me address first that I feel extremely honored and privileged to be here. I'm also challenged. I think we had very inspirational keynotes. We took nicely off with Salman saying like, I need motivational dreamers. This is what I want to give as an inheritance to my son. He talked about listening. We had the talk of Princess Rema, who started a movement, believed in something, and started a movement and can create new things. And as Dr. Khalid addressed so nicely at the end, I have a strong belief that it will happen here. And this is why I feel in place. I'm also a motivational dreamer. My true north, this is where I make my decisions, is based on one great value. I believe in the uniqueness of humankind. Every person is unique. And therefore I think that every person is entitled to have a talent dialogue. Talk about the things you can add as a value, what you're good at. We have to know how people are ticking, what is incentivizing them, what is motivating them. And that is my goal. I want to create a better world. And I know that is very idealistic. Probably has to do with the generation I'm coming from, which I will elaborate later on. But it is what I'm doing. I want to create a better world. How? By simplifying the way we conduct our business. At this point, I am with my family in the Caribbean for 3 months. I just had a newborn. She's 8 months old now. I took the liberty and the freedom to go to the Caribbean, nice environment, but also to have the space to write a book about talent-based management and leadership, unbussed leadership. So who am I? Thinking that I can write a book about leadership. Well, there are so many authorities in that area with high credentials. Guys like Covey, guys like Marcus Buckingham, you name them. If you look on the internet, search on the internet, type leadership, you will find 70,000 different authors, all writing something. Am I saying that they are wrong? Then why would I write a book? If there's already so much at stake and at hand. I truly believe that innovation, what we are talking about, the social innovation, also what the inspirational keynote speakers, my fellow keynote speakers were saying, it's not only about creating something completely new, but sometimes it's also bringing it back to fundamentals, deconstructing it a little bit, and bringing back humankind, human nature in it. And I think that is what scientific management during the Industrial Revolution has driven us away from. When the revolution came, we thought like, okay, we need management, so we're actually cutting the head from the body. We need people who will do repetitive work, and we have management who can think. And when you look at the cycle, the history of mankind, of course people need leadership. That is also human nature. Look how you're acting as a mother or a father in your family. We need a kind of leadership. But are we cutting the head from the body? But in business we do. We want to improve quality. What do? We install a quality unit in our company instead of talking to the people. And this is why I believe that leadership is there. It can be simplified if we go back to what is actually our nature. What is the big challenge now in our world? we're dealing with different kind of generations. And of course we can say like there are different characters. You can type generations in different ways. And this is also a reflection on the companies. We have people from the 60s, mostly the authorities running the show, being on board level or senior management level. We have people from 65 till the 80s, known as the I generation. We have people coming from that, known as the X generation, and yes, there's also a Z generation. And these generations are coming together. And one thing that I've learned from my own experience is I can learn from all of them. As I told you, I'm now for 3 months in the Caribbean, and I have to support one of my daughters with home study. She has to go to school, but I've taken her away, so I have to do it myself. And doing that makes you realize how we are constraining ourselves and limiting ourselves by not being present. We think we can outsource everything. But if you're not connected, if you're not engaging, then there is no motivation. Just one question, and Harold, he's also a philosopher, and he told me this morning, there's a neurobiologist, I cannot remember his name, but he says, do you know when people are learning the most, when they're growing the most, you know when that is? Any idea? In what age? Sorry?
0 to 5.
Starting in the womb, from one cell to a complete human being. And why is the growth so immense? Because they are connected and the mother is engaged. And this is what we do. When children grow in the secured environment of parents, then they grow, then they go out, and they go to schooling systems where they have to run in systems. And then it's not engagement anymore, and there's no connection. So therefore, growth is minimized. Now try to reflect or project that on your style as a manager. I'll come to that later. But this is, I think, good food for thought. Now we have the different generations. How would you characterize that? And what is driving them? If you're from the 1950s, we call it the baby boomers. They are called the people who are run by ideology, ideals. When you have people from the 65, they are called the skeptical part, the skeptical generation. They are the provocators. They are the challengers. And then you have the 80s. How would you describe them? As optimists. They're very optimistic about the things they can achieve. They give me a chance and I can change the world. And then you have the 90s. And they are the realists. This is a study done by an Austrian professor. And I think it's fitting. Although, I must say, I have ideals. I'm a provocator. I'm also optimistic. And this is my lack. I'm not really realistic. But therefore, I need to align and cooperate with other people. Now, what is the role of a leader? Or maybe go to something else. Think about technology. I'm not going to bother you with all kinds of figures. But if you're from the 50s, who is that? From 50 to 65? How many screens did you have in your youth? One screen, right? If you were lucky, a television. Or you had to go to the cinema, right? When you're in this age, how much problems did we have already with the iPad or the iPhone? I come from a time where you would be high technology equipped if you had a semaphone. Do you remember the beeper? Nowadays, the 90s are working with 5 different screens, from 3 to 5. I have a daughter, she's 5 years old, she's teaching me how to use my iPad and my iPhone. She's swiping like that, right? What about the role of leaders? What do we expect, or what is the importance of work? For those people, baby boomers, work was the most important thing. Work, and your incentive will come if you retire. Correct? For this age, it was private, was more important. Work was for getting money, but the private life, the flashy guys, the big materialistic things, that was important. And from this generation, the I generation, it was the work-life balance. Do you recognize this? And the 90s, it's work-life separation. Work-life separation. What about leadership? And now this is, I think, a very important thing. Very important. Do they all perceive their leaders in the same role? And like I said, a guy like Covey or Ricardo Simler or all these kind of guys, they have an idea about leadership. It has to deal about identity. It has to be about authenticity. It has to be about charm. Can it be nurtured or is it nature? All these kinds of concepts are there. But think about how do these generations actually perceive and want to perceive their leaders. These were role models. They saw the leaders as role models. These, leadership was kind of a maturity stage. You can only become a leader if you're mature enough. For this generation, it's handling about this leader is relative for my career. And this one is saying, a leader for me is equal. They don't need leadership. And this is where I'm thinking, this is our challenge. Because if you have a company and you really want to grow, you need all components. You want to have somebody who has an idea, a dream. You want to have people who are optimistic and think they can accomplish it. You want to have the realistic guy saying, what can we accomplish? But also the skeptical guy to keep you sharp. Is that correct? So this is where I based my leadership program on. Stop managing people. I've learned this from my children. I cannot manage my children. I have one of 25, one of 7, 5, and of 8 months. They all have their own will. And if I'm not present and engaging myself and allowing them to experiment, nothing will happen. Actually, I'm deconstructive. I demotivate them. It's maybe something you're not familiar of, but where I live, we have to change winter tires for summer tires. And that is normally, and normally it is like a guy, this is a guy's thing. You change your wheels on your car. And my daughter said, Dad, can I help you? Now, I know myself that I have the tendency of saying, yes, fine, and I'm taking it over. This is how the jack works, this is how you get the wheels up. You see, I'm just doing it, and then she's standing there. She's not learning anything. She loses her motivation to help me out. But if I allow her to experiment and do it, we change wheels in 4 hours. But it's such a nice engagement, because the next time she can do it in 2. The next time Daddy can read his newspaper and she's doing it herself, right? So, what do I say? As leaders, we should not manage people, but we should do something different. And the first part is start to get acquainted. Know who you're working with. If you're saying yourself, I'm unique, you have to accept that everybody is unique. And how do you get acquainted with somebody? It's not on a handshake, it's not on a contract. It is about interacting with each other. Just use your human skills. It's just interacting. Start to know them. Why? Because people have options. Do they want to work with you? What is important for them? How much do they have to commute? How much do they have to invest and to add value? They have all kinds of options. Somebody's new in the team. What option do I have? Is this guy taking over my place? Or this girl? And as a leader, you have to be aware of what's going on with your people. Correct? And that is not something you can do in one moment. It is a continuous process. The second part is, why do we let people work on things they are not good at? Remember, I'm also from the provocating, confronting generation. But why do we do that? Somebody say, no, we're not doing that. Oh, don't we? We have an annual review, and then we're going to talk with our employees and say like, well, you performed well, but this could be done better. Let's focus on your weak areas. What happens then? People lose motivation because it's not something you're not good at. Would you like to develop that? Or do you like to develop your talents? Are you going to push your child forward to do things that they cannot do? Or telling your wife, hey, you know, we're living together, you can also drive the nail in the wall to hang up a picture. It will not stimulate her if she's not having the passion for it. Or the skills. So what I'm saying is, if you know people and you know where her talent area is, or his talent area, make sure that the work content is aligned with that. And that is quite something. How can you make sure that people can work from their strength? Because we have certain kind of roles, obligation, tasks, even KPIs. How do you do that? You have to be aware of what they are capable of. You have to give them the ownership of doing that. They have to have clear expectations. What do you expect from me, and do I get the ownership? And this is really embarrassing. I've been trying to, I've had many leadership roles, and I'm always engaged, and I'm always trying to do the best. This was my intention. But what I realized is I was killing them softly, because I was inspiring them to step forward, show who you are, demonstrate your skills, show me your talents. And then they come over and they say, what do you think of this? And the first thing I say is, let me have a look. Ah, that looks good, but this you can do differently. I don't allow them to experiment. I take away responsibility, I take away ownership, and that's it. It's really embarrassing to tell you, but I like to share that with you. We probably all have these moments in your role of the leader. So get to know your people, know where their talents are, and align that with the work content. Now comes the third part, what I would really call an imperative condition. Make sure there is professional cohesion. In Saudi Arabia, we have a Dutch football coach, right? So you are a little bit familiar with football. Like a guy like Messi. Are you familiar with that? He just won for the fifth time the best football player of the world. Now I have a lot of money, and I'm sponsoring a little club in Copenhagen, third league. But I'm capable of buying Messi. What do you think will happen? Do you think he will push other to go to the next level? What will happen with his level? Let me phrase it in very provocative wording. If I have to join a unit where I think that I'm the idiot and cannot add value, it doesn't work. If somebody thinking he's the best and has to work with idiots, it doesn't work. You have to find a nice spectrum, a nice balance. There is professional cohesion, because if there's cohesion, people will collaborate and they start to share things. And I think we're living in a world, in an economy where we have to share. Are you still with me? So that's 3 components. Now comes the 4th component. And I think that is maybe even the most significant one. And that is what I call social cohesion. And it's not about inviting people on a barbecue, your colleagues as a leader. But it is about creating a culture. And culture is nothing else than saying like, what are the values? How are we working together? Providing feedback in an open and constructive way. This is creating social cohesion. Because if my colleague needs me, I will be there. This is what he can rely on. And the other way around. So as a leader, it's not standing outside the group. It's not only standing inside the group. But this is why I love the concept of Princess Rima. It's an holistic approach. You are one of them, and you're there for them. That is, I think, the premises for being a good leader. This social cohesion is so important because when people feel accepted, acknowledged, they get responsibility, they will blossom. If there's one more condition, and that is that you are capable as a leader to stretch them appropriately. Now, I've been, in my career, also been a director of a training company, doing IT training. And I try to all kinds of concepts for training. Blended learning, e-learning, conventional learning, coaching, mentoring, everything to get more value out of our training. And I had motivated trainers. We were publishing our own training material. We were high-ended. And then companies made contract with us for sending their employees out. And you know what? My evaluation on the training was better if I presented a good lunch. If I would not serve a good lunch, the value of the training was apparently not so good. And then I started talking to the candidates. Why are you here? Well, my manager thought that I had to do a training, and HR department had an opportunity in your office. Okay. Did you really wanted it? Yeah. In the range of yes and no. Then I thought, okay, maybe I should have a talk with the manager. Why did he want somebody to learn something with pivot tabling in Excel? Yeah, because maybe we're going to do something with management information. Oh, that's cool. So I go back to the candidate and say like, so what did you do with all the things we've given you, provided you, the information, the exercises? How much are you bringing into practice? Actually nothing. Well, that's remarkable. You're paying money for an education. You're not doing anything with it. The manager, I'm going to ask if he's satisfied with what we've done. He has no idea. What is going on in our world that we think that we can outsource those kind of things? Why can we send people out to an education for career development or whatever it takes? They come back and we're not allowing them to experiment, to practice, and to internalize that what was given. Why? Because managers are not involved with them. And doing business around the world, to be frankly honest, I don't see any difference in Saudi Arabia, in South America, in Europe. Either it's France or Belgium or Poland or Russia, everywhere is the same. What is happening, scientific management is constraining everybody. Managers don't have time to spend time with their people. If you ask them on 3 different topics, how would you divide your agenda when it comes to, from strategical level, transferring it into operations, developing people, and getting the job done? How would you divide that in your agenda? Then they say reality is, on a strategical level, maybe 5 to 10%. On getting the job done, maybe 70, 80%. Investing in people, maybe 10%. Just think about it. An employee is hired for a year. Let's assume he's working 40 hours a week. Deduct all kinds of holidays, and maybe he can work 1,600 hours a year. Around that range, 1,700 hours a year. How much time, percentage-wise, you think it's good to invest, to engage? 1%? That is 16 hours in a year. If I would invest 16 hours in my children a year, then I'm completely obsolete. I'm not of any relevance to my children. Am I correct? So what would be relevant? 10%? 160 hours. That's 4 weeks. Well, mind you, if you're a leader of 50 employees. So what are we going to do? What are we going to do if we want to have social innovation? We had a nice round discussion on the table about if the oil resources are getting obsolete in the world, what is Saudi Arabia going to do, or the Gulf area? Those natural resources are not our currency anymore. It is time, it is knowledge, it's the way we create a better world. And I think it starts with leadership. And leadership, it's like Napoleon said, there's leadership in everybody. Everybody can be a general. You just have to act on it. And just reflect. How are you actually running your own family? Or maybe I should do a little exercise with you. I'm not new age. I'm not going to fool around with you. But I like to ask you to go back in your own experience. And please close your eyes. All of you, close your eyes, please. Now think about the time about your personal growth. Think about the time that you were the most successful in your personal quest. Think about how did you actually wake up in the morning if you're going to the job. Did you feel like anything like proudness? What was actually your absence rate? Did you even go to the job with a headache? How were you perceived by your colleagues? Were they willing to support you? Open up your eyes. Has everybody this experience? And that is a very natural way of experience. It's a very natural thing that you have this experience. Why? Because people have the tendency to collaborate. And if you go back into history, how did people unite? And why? Because they had an urgency, a necessity of a commonality of interest, a necessity to survive, that people are bonding. We are social creatures. We need to communicate, we need to socialize in order to accomplish something. And that natural fact can happen every day. This is why you have a family. You know your children, you know your husband, your spouse. You know where the talents are lying, you know where the pitfalls are lying, and you work with that. And the most important tools for this is constructive feedback. And that is also how I want to wrap up my presentation, coming back to the generations. Feedback is so important to understand what you're actually contributing. We have to start to realize that the human capital is actually the only asset that can make a difference, that can create welfare, social welfare. We should not be reluctant in listening to the youth. I learn more, with all respect, more from my 8-month-old kid, from my 5- and 7-year-old, than from my peers. I learn a lot from my seniors, and I learn a lot from the youth. They are the ones who can inspire me, who can bring me out of my own little box, out of my own little paradigm. This is what we have to do, and you can only do that with constructive feedback. And that is important. Like Salam said, if I talk negative, I will get negative things back. And that is also with feedback. When I'm positive, you will be positive. If I'm constructive in my feedback, I can be critical, but if I'm constructive, we can have a constructive solution. I hope that maybe I'm not so inspiring as the other speakers, but I at least hope that I can appeal on your humanity and give you food for thought, and that everybody is unique and that we should work together. Yeah? That is, I think you actually gave the answer in the last remark. How can we find the balance? What I'm saying is we cannot outsource it, but we have to take responsibility on the different levels. I can definitely send my kids to good schooling when I have the resources, but it doesn't mean that I have outsourced it. And what I know from the schooling systems, they are very, let's call it instrumental. You have to learn facts, you have to do mathematics, because then you can have a good career. But there's also another part. It's about the social interaction. It's about giving them context how to learn. And that is the role I have to take. And I can only do that if I'm present. And now I'm facing the challenge to do homeschooling. I thought that is easy. I can calculate. I have a 7-year-old. I can calculate, subtract and multiply. Easy. But how do I stimulate and motivate her? And how can I give her context? For example, I am a sailor, and I'm really closing off because I don't want to run out of time. My girl wants to sail, and she says, "Dad, the wind is coming from the front, and we're sailing against the wind." Yes, but should the wind not blow in our sails? That's her. No. Of course, it can be done, but then you don't go as fast. And then I have to learn to teach her about physics and vacuum and aerodynamics in her own wording, and then she gets stimulated. And this is where she learns. When she comes back into the classroom, she has something to tell, because I gave her an experimental learning environment. And that is something different than operational schooling. Does that answer your question? Then I'm an exotic, I don't speak Arabic, but I can at least say shukran for the attention.